Good morning, everyone. My name is Holly Dagris, and I am a non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs, and I'm honored here to give remarks for today's Atlantic Council front page event. Zan, Zendagi, Azadi. Jian, Jian, Azadi. Women, life, freedom. The slogan heard across the globe. Contrary to the lack of media coverage, this month marks 8 months of ongoing protests in Iran against the Islamic Republic. Protests that had taken place in various ways, from street gatherings, rooftop chants, graffiti, to public displays of not wearing mandatory hijab. This continuity is unprecedented. The clerical establishment is in a tinderbox situation, and it's only a matter of time before the protesters pour into the streets en masse because the people of Iran have had enough. They want the regime gone. As I speak, over 13,000 schoolgirls have been poisoned at schools across the country. Many believe this is a punishment for their participation in anti-establishment protests. Additionally, in the past 2 weeks, there have been an alarming rise in executions, with over 57 executed. Human rights organizations widely believe that these wave of executions are an effort to instill fear and silence dissent. Every day, women remain defiant against mandatory hijab by appearing in the streets without the veil, and even in some cases, dresses and shorts, items of clothing only seen at home behind closed doors, ordinary freedoms we here take for granted. The world admires and applauds the bravery of the people of Iran, but especially their women and girls. As an American of Iranian heritage, I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce this incredible cohort of Iranian women who will be accepting the 2023 Distinguished Humanitarian Leadership Award on behalf of the women and girls of Iran at tonight's annual Distinguished Leadership Awards at the Anthem in Washington, D.C., which I should note will be live streamed. Dr. Mehrangiz Kar is a human rights lawyer and an activist. She was one of the first women attorneys to oppose the Islamization of gender relations following the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Kar has been an active public defender in Iran's civil and criminal courts and has lectured extensively both in Iran and abroad. Azameh Jangravi is an Iranian paralegal, human rights advocate, and former political prisoner residing in Canada. She is primarily known for being one of the girls of Revolution Street during the protest against compulsory hijab in 2017. Jangravi was taken into custody in 2018 after removing her headscarf in protest on Enqilab Street, standing atop an electricity transformer box and waving it above her head. She was later released temporarily on bail and fled from Iran to Turkey before relocating to Canada. Nazanin Noor is an Iranian-American actress, writer, and activist. She has appeared on shows such as Netflix's Big Mouth, Madam Secretary, and Persia's Got Talent, and can currently be seen in the film 1,000 Little Cuts on Showtime. Noor could most recently be seen on stage in Washington, starring in the studio theater production of English. She is one of several Iranian Americans in the public eye speaking out on the ongoing situation in Iran. I'd like to also note that Dr. Mahsa Afkhami is sick with COVID-19 and was unable to attend, but she is recovering. Finally, I'm delighted to introduce our brilliant moderator, Ali Rogan of PBS NewsHour. Ali, over to you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody in the room today and to all our viewers tuning in online. And I'm honored to be joined by these three incredible women. As Holly mentioned, we are here today to discuss the state of women's rights and human rights in Iran from pre-revolution all the way to the current Zan Zendagi Azadi movement. And we can do all that in 45 minutes. That is a very steep task, but I know that this is a very well-equipped group to do just that. So let's get right into it. The first question I'm going to ask, and parenthetically before I do, I want to note, I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience here and online. So please submit your questions in the format that's already been presented to the group. And for this panel, each of the questions I'm going to ask, the first one will be open-ended, and then each one will be directed to one of you specifically, but I invite anybody to weigh in as well. So the first question. As Holly mentioned, the Islamic Republic is doubling down on its oppressive tactics. It's increased, there have been 13,000 schoolgirls that have been poisoned. Hangings are at a historic high. So what do these oppressive measures tell you about the state of the regime and whether or not it is under pressure from these protests? Whoever would like to begin. maybe we go down the line. Dr. Carr.
As you know, in this movement, regular women, students of university, students of high school, all they were and they are involved with that. And in Zan Zindagi Azadi, all Iranian women from all layer of the society, they were working, and now they are working in some other style. And something that you ask about that, like poisoning daughters in high schools. We think the reason is because they were working a lot in the movement, and one of their activity was because probably you don't know that in Kitab-Hay Darsi school books, the first page is a picture of Khomeini, and the second page is a picture of Khamenei. And the students of high school, sometimes they were, taking out these pictures from their school books, and removing in front of the camera, and these film and video posted to some media outside the country, and that's the reason. I think they are very against daughters in high school, and we think that now this is some kind of revenge, sometimes intiqam giri, intiqam ju'i, and the government doesn't care about that and doesn't say anything and doesn't investigate, very serious investigate in that. And they don't say that, what is this? Sometimes they say something that is not true. They say some part like وزارت آموزش و پرورش, the ministry that this kind, is related with that. They say that this is not true. This is something that they pretend that there is nothing, there is no poison, and this is something that the people in Iran now, they are very angry with that, because the students of women students, daughters and students of high schools, they don't have any safety, any security, and the parents now, they are very angry, and they go around the high schools and they say, if the government cannot guarantee our daughters' life and our daughters' security, we will go around the high school and we will, find something that they poison them. And this is our duty if the government doesn't do their duty.
So that's going to be a big test. But I'm curious to get all your thoughts, and I apologize, we didn't discuss this in advance, but who do you think is behind these poisonings?
The government.
Is it the government?
I mean, everybody believes it's regime. The regime is complicit because this is also a regime that has eyes and ears everywhere. They kidnap dissidents abroad and bring them back for execution. They have intelligence on dissidents abroad. There was a kidnapping that was that the FBI foiled a plot against a leading voice, Masih Ali-Najad. So it's very difficult for anybody to believe that a regime that uses facial recognition technology to send tickets to women who aren't wearing their hijab properly cannot find out who's behind these poisonings. So everybody believes that the regime is actually behind this. And it's been going on since November of 2022. So that's months now that this has been happening. And there's countless videos on the internet from activist groups within Iran that are showing girls in hospitals, with oxygen masks. They can't breathe. They smell tangerine in the air or rotten fish in the air. So it's very real. And I know that the regime tries to downplay it, but it's also very difficult to kind of loiter around a girls' school in Iran. And so again, that's why it's very difficult for anybody to believe that the regime is not complicit in this. Parents that have gone to ask questions are met with brute force by regime forces. So not only are no answers being given, this is still continuing. As of just a few days ago, we saw videos from other poisonings, and it's across all cities and provinces in Iran too. So. Yeah.
So what I'm curious about is, Azam, is this an example of the regime really feeling the pressure that they are taking these steps of poisoning young girls?
Actually, I don't know. It's really complicated, but it might be their regime is behind of this situation. Mehrangiz and Nazanin mentioned about poisoning, and I want to talk about executions. Well, the government is now trying to create fear among people by increasing execution. In the past 10 days, over 55 people have been executed in which 26 Baluch citizens executed, and I think despite the suppression of Islamic Republic of Iran, but the protest is ongoing in Baluchistan, and every Friday they shut down the internet, and I think we have to talk about Baluchistan and Kurdistan, and because the suppression in that areas every time increased by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
That's a very, very important point. Azam, I want to stay with you and ask, let's take a step back and let's talk about the factors that led to this round of protests.
The protests that begin in mid-September were unprecedented in their scale and duration. People from all levels of society, including women of various entities, in cities and social classes came together to demand change. A key point of contention was the mandatory hijab laws, which require all Iranian women to cover their hair. And although the protests were initially led by women, they soon expand to include men as well. The government attempted to suppress the protests with violence and repression, but the movement continued to grow and gained momentum. People from different backgrounds joined driven by a shared sense of frustration with the current government. While there have been some reports of misinformation circulating about the government's intention, most people understand that the issue of mandatory hijab is just one of the many issues that need to be addressed. It is clear that until there is real change in Iran, people will continue to demand change and speak out against the injustice in Iran. As I said, the government is now trying to create fear among people by increasing execution. 2 men were executed in the past week, and Youssef Mehrdad and Sadrullah Fazlizadeh were executed for just running online group criticizing Islam. A dual Swedish Iranian citizen also executed last week. Additionally, more than 11 individuals are currently on this row in connection with the recent protest. The world has been outraged by these killings and has called on Iran to stop them. We need to act now and raise our voices and call on the Islamic Republic to stop the executions.
Nazanin, to Azam's point about the need to raise your voice, we've seen some really interesting subversive ways that protesters, especially the young women and girls in Iran, are using social media. They're using just formats that the regime is not familiar with to register their dissent. So does that add a new dimension that we haven't seen before in previous iterations of these protests? And how is that affecting how this message is being communicated to the regime?
Yeah, absolutely. Social media has been a huge help, actually, in this movement. It's the first time that we've seen it. Gen Z is very adept at using TikTok and Instagram and figuring out how to make things trend and go viral. An example of that is the video of the girls of Ekbatan. I don't know if everybody saw that video, but there's a song by Rema, a popular Afrobeats artist, with Selena Gomez, and they have a song called Calm Down. So these young girls made this dance video, and then they were detained afterward, of course, and had to give a forced apology video. But that went viral, and that caused everybody around the world from various countries. I mean, it was like trending billions in hashtags on TikTok. And it raised awareness for people to understand what's actually happening in Iran. It gives people outside of Iran a connection to those inside, showing, hey, we're actually more similar than you might think, because a lot of people don't have information on what Iran was like prior to 1979 either. And so social media has been a really huge tool in pushing this forward. And this is also, the Gen Zers are the ones who are at the forefront of all of this. And as Dr. Karn Aziz said, these poisonings seem to be a retaliation for the fact that they have been ripping out pictures of the Supreme Leader. They've been setting fire. There's countless photos now that are iconic that time replicated, with the girls with their backs to the camera, with the middle finger. So all of these things that they're doing, they're very smart. They know exactly how to get the attention of people across the world. And we have never seen that level of social media activity to move a movement forward when it comes to Iran.
And it's fascinating because it really does seem to be techniques using forums that are just completely unfamiliar to, especially the conservative clerics. So Dr. Carr, for you have for a long time, part of your scholarship has been about tracking the divisions between the moderates, the reformers within the government, and the hardliners, looking from the 1990s to now. So can you get us up to date on what is the balance, what is the tension currently in the regime between moderates and conservatives? Is there any tension there, or is it just completely overrun by conservatives? How do you see those tensions playing out now versus in previous decades where there was a bit of a reformist element?
At the beginning, I would like to say that I practiced as a lawyer 22 years in Islamic Republic of Iran. So when I started the practice as a lawyer in Iran, I was very young. And immediately we had Islamic the revolution, Islamic revolution, and the victory of Khomeini in this revolution. So I had been in a very complicated situation. Not because I was a lawyer, but because I was a woman and lawyer. I think two criminal, two criminal in their, in their eyes, because they immediately they said that women cannot be judge. So they removed all female judge from judiciary system. And we were not sure that they give us permission to continue work as a lawyer, but they did. And they said because everybody is able to choose a lawyer, probably a mad lawyer, a crazy lawyer. And this is, and Islam, Islam doesn't care about that. This is something that the people.
If you want to choose a female lawyer, that's your choice.
Yeah, it's your choice. If you want to choose a mad, lawyer, that is your choice, and that's why we could. We could survive. This was the reason, the base of our job. So I can say that since Khomeini ordered for mandatory hijab, this movement started in Iran and continued. But sometimes it was very slow, it was very hide, sometimes it was getting clear and obvious. I can say that in first decade, we were very, very active for mandatory hijab, and for something that is full of, our penal code and family law after they came on power are full of discriminations against the women, gender discrimination, and we can say this is some kind of gender apartheid. And but we cannot have a demonstration. Just somebody like me started talking and writing about this discrimination, legal discriminations. After that, the second, we had involved with a very bad war between Iran and Iraq, and 8 years we had been involved that, and that's why everything was closed about women's rights and human rights, and nobody could talk about that in any other country that is involved with war. So we can say that during the time, everything was slow or nothing was active in that way. After war, after 8 years that the war was over, Hashemi Rafsanjani was on power as president, and he ordered open very small opportunity for writing and talking about something, but under control, under very heavy control.
And remind us, this was in the 1990s?
1990s, yeah. Yes. And because I should make short everything. This is history, and it is not easy.
No, it's
and
not. You're doing a great job.
After 1990, we reached 1996, and 1996 is very important period of revolution history started, because the name is reformism movement. Mm-hmm. And the president Khatami and the people, most people of Iran, for the first time, they voted to a president of this system, this political system. After that, because the slogan was different, like rule of law and like we should have civil society, it was very important, because he ordered, and the reformists ordered, that women can have independent NGO. And it was very helpful for women. It was the first time that something like that happened in Iran. But either during this time, they didn't give me permission. Because it,
during the reformist era.
Everything was under control. And they said, no, you cannot have any NGO, any, I do have all documents of that. But some of young Iranian women, they could register and they could be active as NGO. This was something that started, another kind of
activism, or another kind of activism.
Yes, as NGO.
Yeah.
And they could be very active. And then after that, we had some campaign, like 1 million signature, and no to stoning, and something like that. And Iranians, some part of Iranian women, they came to streets, and it was very important. They came to public area, and they were talking, and they were giving a slogan against discriminations, not against the political system. But after that, step by step, Ahmadinejad came and stopped everything and suppressed all women activists, and they most of them, they left Iran, and now they are all over the world. And after that, everybody thought that everything is stopped and never be active about women's rights. But as you know, and as you see now, everything is full of energy, and it started as جنبش movement Mahsa and Zan زندگی آزادی. This is full of energy. This is full of anger, and this is different with some other that we had been before that.
And to Dr. Kar, to your point about how many activists left Iran, so now the diaspora is very rich, very, very vocal. And so Nazanin, I'm curious to get your sense of what is the state of the diaspora now? Are they united around these protests, any more so than perhaps the cohesion was in previous years?
Yeah, I want to say just to that point too that you brought up of Canada being differences in the government, reformists, et cetera, that the information coming out of Iran and people I talk to on the ground, most people don't see any difference between any, they all think it's this, they're all cut from the same cloth. So it's a regime that's irreformable and irredeemable in the eyes of the overwhelming majority of Iranians. To the diaspora, yes, I remember in 2009, I was actually in Iran. I got there 2 days before the election, the Green Movement elections, and I witnessed what happened afterward, which was the violent suppression and oppression by the state to quash those protests. And I remember that it must have been like a blip in the American media. It maybe was in a 48-hour news cycle, and then it was gone. And we've had protests that have built up in Iran since, the last 12, 13 years, but if you want to just go back 2017, 2018, 2019, there was the Bloody November in 2019, 1,500 protesters got killed within a few days, and it wasn't on the news at all. And now we saw that actually, the diaspora rallied around the people of Iran. I have never seen that level of unity in the entire time that I've lived in this country as far as, giving a spotlight and attention to Iran. There's protests and rallies that have been held in major protests and rallies held in cities and countries all over the world ever since September. Most of them are happening in cities every weekend. And while we would love more media coverage and attention and a spotlight kept on Iran and all the atrocities, the poisonings, the executions, the fact that the people want this regime gone, the unity that I've seen and the level of attention is something that I've never seen before. And it's absolutely necessary and vital to keep, because their internet gets cut off. They don't have the means a lot of the times to get the messages out. So it is up to the people in the diaspora to continue to amplify their voice and make sure that the world hears what they're saying and what's actually happening inside of the country.
Absolutely. Let's take a couple questions from the audience. I invite anybody who has a question. While you're thinking of your questions, I'd love to ask, Azam, you were one of the kind of, as we say, OGs of the anti-hijab movement. You stood on an electric transformer, as we said. You're a girl of Revolution Street, which is where these protests were happening. So what does it mean to you to see these women and young girls in the streets now?
The fight for women's rights in Iran has been ongoing for over 44 years, as Merangiz says. One of the first protests against mandatory hijab in Iran occurred on March 8, 1980, where women have used various campaigns, activist groups, NGOs, and to protest the violation of their rights and demand justice and equality. However, they have paid heavy price for their activism, including suppression, threats, imprisonments, and mental and physical torture. In 2018, when I decided to protest against mandatory hijab, there were already ongoing protests against the regime in Iran. The Iranian public was expressing their anger in the protest with the wide range of chants direct toward the regime and its leadership. In the same days, Vida Mowahed performed a symbolic act of acting her scarf off and putting it on a stick to peacefully protest hijab laws. A brave move that followed 40 years of women's activism. And this is important because the 44 years ongoing activism, and I also wanted to be part of these 40-year-old movements and raise my voice against mandatory hijab laws. As an Iranian woman, I had experienced a lot of problems in my life, particularly when I decided to separate my ex-husband. These difficulties made me more aware of inequality and suppression that Iranian women have to endure. This made me think about what was happening to Iranian women, and I felt compelled to protest against such cruelties, I believe that each woman in Iran has experienced similar problems as this is a year of suppression. My hope was to be part of the activists who cared about creating more awareness in society. And on the day I protested, no one stood by me or supported me when I was arrested, And right now, we have seen every man stand for women. This is the more important things. I think this learning and becoming aware process has done so that men are now standing by women, fighting for human and women's rights.
To that point, and I'm so sorry to cut you off, Azam, but I do want to get to some audience questions. And somebody asked something that I think ties into this, which is the solidarity that we're seeing. Is that translating to internationally? Somebody asks, how do you see the influence of regional solidarity among women? Is it active in places like Afghanistan? Are they giving each other energy and support as needed? So let's broaden it out and look at the regional solidarity that's happening? What are you all seeing? Whoever wants to take that. And I think, unfortunately, that may be our last question of the session.
I mean, there were videos of women in Afghanistan that were marching with signs in solidarity with the women of Iran as well. I mean, they're neighbors, and Afghan women are under terrible suppression and oppression themselves. And I feel like there has been a global outcry, but there needs to be more. There's actions that have been taken by various countries. At the UN, there's a fact-finding mission that was created. People banded together and got the Islamic Republic kicked off the Commission on the Status of Women, for example. But I still feel like there hasn't been the amount of solidarity that there needs to be and the amount of support for this. It's a human rights issue, it's a human rights crisis, it's a women's rights crisis. So we need people from around the world in various countries that also believe in women's rights and human rights to also stand up for the women, girls, and the people of Iran.
Excellent. And somebody else asks a question, with all that is going on, we see regional neighbors like Saudi Arabia normalizing ties with Iran. What does this mean for the protest movement? Are there any implications with other countries in the region normalizing ties with Iran?
You mean the relationship, the new relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Are there any implications there for the protest movement?
The protest. I cannot find any, reason
or
for
divorce. Yes.
divorce. And we cannot predict the future of these negotiations, because a lot of challenges are between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and I don't believe that everything could be, but we know Saudi Arabia that everybody knows is very serious with Islam and with limitations and the discriminations, gender discrimination. But now we are hearing that something is changed either in Saudi Arabia, and that is something that Iranian people, they are watching that, and they think why they are pushing to very bad situation, worse situation, and Saudi Arabia is going toward. And this is something that Iranian women now, they think about that, but they don't compare themselves with women in Saudi Arabia, because we had a very different background during Shah, during Pahlavis. Pahlavis changed a lot of things in Iran, like women's rights.
Right.
But also anything that legitimizes the government is not going to be a good move. Anything that emboldens them is not going to be a good move or solidifies their status. But it's not deterring people in Iran from protesting in their own ways. They still do come out to the streets. It might not be at the same effect as it was a few months ago, but the fact that women are taking off their hijabs, men are supporting them, also by wearing shorts, by the way, because that's not allowed. So that's one way that people are dissenting using civil disobedience. So those types of things are continuing to happen, and they're not going to stop. And schoolgirls, university students in general, boys and girls, have been protesting for the last few weeks as well. So I don't believe that is going to stop what has already started in Iran. There's no going back, is what the people of Iran say.
In the time that we have left, I'd like to go around and in a few sentences, can you tell me what you would like to see from the international community to give the support that this movement needs? Dr. Carr, would you like to begin?
Yeah. Now we can understand that it's not enough that human rights institution, international human rights institution, work for removing gender discrimination in Iran. Now we can understand that all Western government, they should work with human rights institution, because as my friends mentioned about execution, now is very important if they can stop it, because if everybody is getting crazy in Iran by this situation, and either us that are outside Iran, when we get these news, we cannot, what could we do?
Right.
Because 6 hours they do one execution in Iran now. And all of them, the court and the investigation, it is not justice. They don't have lawyer. They don't have lawyer, and the lawyer is coming from government, and it is related with government. So, so we can say that international community can do a lot of work for Iran, but so far we cannot see any results of that in this movement that now it is our focus.
As an internet security researcher and digital security trainer, my concern is about internet. Because the Islamic Republic of Iran, when want to suppress people of Iran, they shut down the internet, and it would be good for Iranian people if the international community find a way to help people for internet and especially VPNs, especially support us for helping people for internet shutdowns.
Right. We've seen that the sanctions don't really seem to discriminate between uses for speaking out and for doing business with the regime.
Exactly.
Nazanin.
I just think overall the global community needs to condemn the actions of the Islamic Republic, not legitimize them. Even the smallest action, like heads of state when they meet with Islamic Republic officials, about women not wearing the headscarf, it's not obligatory, they don't have to do it. I think things like, the UN just appointed the Islamic Republic to a commission that's overseeing human rights, and it's an absolute slap in the face to Iranians because they just executed 2 people a few days ago simply for running a social media channel that was questioning religion. So the world needs to stop doing things like that because all they're doing is solidifying and emboldening the regime. They need to pass legislation and do things that support the people of Iran instead of emboldening the regime. They need to hold them accountable for human rights abuses. They need to, list the EU can list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. The US can pass the Mahsa Act. There's a lot of things that can be done that haven't been done yet, and I hope to see that.
Nazanin Noor, Behangiz Kar, and Azam Jangravi, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a fascinating conversation, and congratulations tonight on the award that you are receiving from the Atlantic Council. It is so well deserved. I think we can all join in a round of applause for this incredible panel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So that concludes the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.